are these people?
This is more an update, but this story, I believe, is important for especially those of you who might be green card holders to kind of have an understanding what your rights are in terms of how essentially you're a pseudo citizen of the US, and especially given our environment, how you can protect yourself in terms of the status that you have. I will argue too, this might also be good especially for people who are naturalized or have birthright citizenship, as well.
Right.
Just for you to be aware, because I think given our environment, especially if you're talking about things that the government may not like, who's to say that they can't um relinquish your citizenship? I mean, it could be very possible for that to happen to any of us. But especially if you're a green card holder, this should be pertinent information that you guys should know, especially given what's happening to Mahood Khalil. So this is an article. Shout out to Reef for pulling this for me.
You're welcome.
That he pulled from curated from Consortium News, which was pulled from the court conversation. So this article written by Gabriel J. Chin, which he titles Green Card Holders' Rights. As pro-Palestinian protest leader Mahood Khalil faces deportation, legal scholar Gabriel J. Chin lists 3 major differences between the rights of citizens and lawful permanent residents, otherwise known as green card holders. So actually, let me get my screen. There we go. So Gabriel reads as follows. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has said that the government will deport lawful permanent residents who support Hamas and came to the U.S. as students with an intent to, quote, to rile up all kinds of anti-Jewish student, anti-Semitic activities, referring to the Palestinian rights protests at universities in 2024. And if you end up having a green card, not citizenship, but a green card, as a result of that visa while you're here and those activities, we're going to kick you out. It's as simple as that. This is not about free speech. This is about people that don't have a right to be in the United States to begin with, Rubio said on March 12, 2025. That policy is now instead Mahood Khalil, a recent graduate at Columbia University and a leader in the Palestinian rights protest movement at the school. Khalil, a Palestinian who was born in Syria, faces deportation after he was arrested on March 8, 2025 in New York City. The Department of Homeland Security said that the Secretary of State had determined Khalil's presence or activities in the country pose serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. Khalil entered the U.S. on a student visa in 2022. In 2024, he received a green card and became a lawful permanent resident, meaning he has the legal right to work and stay in the U.S. There are an estimated 12.8 million lawful permanent residents in the country. Khalil's lawyers say that his arrest and pending deportation are unconstitutional. In many respects, the rights of lawful permanent residents and citizens are similar. Yet, citizens and lawful permanent residents do not enjoy equal status under the law. And let's find out exactly what those are. The Supreme Court and other courts recognize that lawful permanent residents have First Amendment rights to free speech. Yet, the Supreme Court upheld deporting lawfully permanent residents in the 1950s based on their political party activity, in particular membership in the Communist Party.
Yeah.
So while lawful permanent residents may not be criminally prosecuted for their political speech or activity, what they say or write may affect their ability to remain in the U.S. if the government determines they are a security risk. I, being Gabriel, a scholar of international law, here are the 3 major differences between the rights of citizens and lawful permanent residents. 1. Limited political rights. Lawful permanent residents are people born in other countries who can legally work and live in the U.S. for as long as they like. I'll add as long as your green card is valid. They may enlist in the U.S. Armed Forces, apply to become U.S. citizens, and are legally protected against discrimination by private employers. States also generally cannot discriminate against lawful permanent residents, though states may require certain groups of people, such as teachers or police, to have U.S. citizenship. Between 1820 and 1920, non-citizens routinely participated in different aspects of government, including voting, holding office, and jury service in many states and territories. And again, that depends on the state. I know, like in Massachusetts, for example, you're not able to vote, for example,
Right.
if you're a green card holder. So you have to check with your state to determine what rights you have or may not have, depending on your green card status is determined by your
Gotcha.
state. These days, states and the federal government generally allow only citizens to serve on juries, hold political positions, and vote. With a few exceptions, such as voting in some local elections, permanent residents are not able to do any of those things.
You got it?
The distinction between non-citizens and citizens extends to other areas of life, such as public benefits. The Supreme Court has frequently stated, in the exercise of its broad power over naturalization and immigration, Congress regularly makes rules that would be unacceptable if applied to citizens. In practice, this means that the federal government, and to a much lesser extent states, do not offer public benefits, such as Medicaid and other kinds of government support, to lawful permanent residents and other non-citizens on the same basis as citizens. For example, lawful permanent residents must generally wait 5 years before becoming eligible for certain programs intended to support low-income people, such as supplementary security income and the supplemental nutrition assistance program, food stamps. Finally, unlike citizens, lawful permanent residents can lose their legal immigration status. Congress has enacted many grounds for deporting a non-citizen or stopping them from entering the country. Some courts have found that the U.S. government can deport a lawful permanent resident because of national security or terrorism concerns, even if the person has not committed a crime. The Trump administration argues that they can deport lawful permanent residents like Khalil under the 1952 Immigration and Nationality Act, which states that a lawful permanent resident can be deported if the Secretary of State has reasonable ground to believe that this person would have potentially serious adverse foreign policy consequences for the United States. The Trump administration has initiated deportation proceedings against Khalil on this ground. U.S. law also provides that any non-citizen can be deported if the Secretary of State and Attorney General jointly determine that the person is associated with terrorism or pose a threat to the U.S. In addition, the law says that an immigrant can be deported if they endorse or espouse terrorist activity or persuade others to endorse or espouse terrorist activity or support a terrorist organization. Still, lawful permanent residents are entitled to certain basic rights, such as retaining a lawyer to represent them in administrative hearings and court before they are deported. By contrast, the U.S. government cannot deport a U.S. citizen for any reason. However, sometimes U.S. citizens are deported by mistake. I'm going to put that in quotes, air quotes, I'm sure.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that, though.
I can also, that's what I'm saying, because I could see that if you're a birthright, if you were born in the country, but if you're a naturalized citizen,
I mean, there's plenty of reasons they might deport U.S. citizens if they're just not paying attention. You know,
right? But that's what I'm saying. Does a naturalized citizen, if you're able to do this with a green card holder, what's to say they can do that with a naturalized citizen more so? So that's kind of like where my concern is. But anyway, indeed, the Supreme Court has found that while it is constitutional to execute a military member for desertion in wartime, it would be cruel and unusual punishment to deprive them of citizenship. There have been few recent court cases testing the scope of deporting lawful permanent residents on national security grounds based on pure speech. In 1999, the Supreme Court ruled that if a person is deportable, they are deportable, even if there is some other reason that motivated the government's deportation proceedings, such as a suspicion that the non-citizen is involved with crime or terrorism. The Supreme Court also then held that the government could deport non-citizens for technical visa violations, even if the case was based on the government's belief that the non-citizens were associated with a terrorist group. There is also some precedent arguing that deportation based on adverse foreign policy consequences is too broad and non-specific to be constitutional. Indeed, Marianne Trump Barry, the sister of the president, held this opinion when she was a federal judge in the mid-1990s. But Samuel Alito, then an appeals court judge, overturned Barry's ruling on procedural grounds in 1996. For its part, the Supreme Court has occasionally held that very broad and indeterminate deportation grounds are void for vagueness, meaning so sweeping and imprecise that they are unconstitutional. Khalil's lawyers appeared with the U.S. government lawyers before a federal judge in New York on March 12th. Their goal, to get Khalil moved from internment in Louisiana back to internment in New York. But that may well be just the beginning of a long haul for the Palestinian student. Courts have proven reluctant to second-guess security grounds rationales in immigration cases. For this reasons, cases like Khalil may go on for years. And I think that's the point. I think, as I said, probably 2 weeks ago now, that they're looking to make this case, well, they're looking to make an example of Khalil, like Trump, just really essentially to scare people. But I think it's also, I think given the context of the case, and like the government has to prove that he is essentially a security threat. And, really, if especially what you're seeing online, there really hasn't been any evidence to suggest, that in any way Khalil has been, problematic, so to speak. That being said, we do know that he is involved in a documentary that Macklemore is producing. So my question is, how is that going to affect this case, if at all? And actually, now thinking about it, will Macklemore be implicated in this possibly?
I think it's more like this reminds me of if we remember back to the Assange case, right? Mm-hmm. And how they claimed that he would be persecuted for, his the nation he was born in, being Australia, right? Mm-hmm. And he wouldn't be an American citizen and therefore wouldn't get the First Amendment rights, right? That was part of their legal case, right? It definitely, I feel like there's a lot of parallels here too, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I mean, clearly, they're using that probably parts of the Patriot Act, I would imagine, to go after this. I know he's also using what's the Aliens of a Foreign Power Act or whatever, something like that. The same one that put Japanese people into internment camps, right? He's been sending people to Bukele and that kind of stuff when in regards to deporting individuals. So not the best track record on those policies for sure. So, but yeah, I don't know.
But yeah, you're right. I definitely feel like this is definitely giving Assange to me in terms of more than likely this case will probably be prolonged. I would argue probably for Trump's entire term, honestly.
Well, he's in the trial's in right now. New Jersey, right? I think it got moved to New Jersey.
Right, yeah. So they're working on getting him back in the New York area. because right now he's in Louisiana. But yeah, but it's definitely going to be long. But I think the idea is that to keep it so long that hopefully people will forget, or most people will forget. Kind of, I wouldn't say. I think Assange. I think in a sense this is slightly better than Assange because more people are aware of what's going on. No one really had a clue of what was happening to Assange besides really us in independent media. So, but so while he has a right in terms of free speech, he is protected under that, under the law as a green card holder. The argument, as Gabriel is saying, that what the government is going to try and do is commit to show, and this is what they're going to have to prove, is that he is a security threat to the United States. Now, so really it's the idea of finding, I think in the government's mind, a judge who will essentially favor them, which, given the state of our country right now, I wouldn't say it's easy, but highly likely that, they will try and find someone who will, make the verdicts in the government's favor. But you never know. But as I said, they have to prove it. So, but again, given,
well, this is also
how
connected to Columbia, like reviewing programs for like Center for Palestinian Studies, Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies, Middle Eastern, South African, African Studies, right? Which I'm betting it also coincides with Trump's and particularly like Florida politicians' education doctrines, right? So that's going to be an interesting angle of this too. So
so I think it's just this will be larger than Khalil, and I think especially given what we've spoken about in terms of colleges, and not even colleges, like schools, K-12 schools, are really cracking down on what is being talked about regarding Israel, and especially, or lack of, anything related to Palestine at all. So I think this is definitely either way a story that we should be watching closely, because the implications for this, I think, will be extremely problematic, across the board. But more importantly, it's the idea of, especially if you're a green card holder, to be very, and I hate the idea of censorship, but it's still the idea of be extremely careful, but extremely strategic in what you say. And your actions, especially if you are looking to support the cause in Palestine, because your actions,
we know they're watching social media. They're using AI to track a lot of stuff, so you definitely have to be kind of careful with that. But it doesn't mean stop talking about it though. So keep that in mind. But but it could get you demonetized if you talked about it though. I don't know anyone who would have that problem. Maybe us. We might have the problem. So you can go to cash.app/indienewsnetwork, scan that QR code on your screen, or as always, links are in the description below. We appreciate any little bit of dollary dues you could throw at us, but if you can't, times are tough, eggs are expensive, you can go to just hit the like button, find that subscribe button if you haven't already, share the video. Some of you already have. Leave a comment. Let us know what you think. How worried are you about these deportation things? Otherwise, thanks for watching.